What is going on, YouTube fam? Welcome to the Jonathan Dearman Show, the least political show on YouTube. And exciting news, guys. I actually think that I'm going to have a set studio to be able to film and pump out more content starting this week, either this week or next week. And I'm really excited about that. It's been a long time coming. I actually was hoping to have it done way sooner, but life happens, and I apologize. Thank you guys for your patience. But that is coming either this week or next week, like I said. Until then, you're in my backyard, and so if you hear background noise of cars driving by and the wind picking up and dying out, it's because you're in my backyard. But I did try to create a little set back here, including actually, it looks like this wire I put here to try to look relatable, give it a relatable feel, kind of an undisciplined look. I don't know, be trendy. So there you have it. But we have an election this week, guys, which is obviously a huge election. And I wanted to come on and at least talk through several things that are on my mind. And so I'm just going to list off the things that I'm going to talk about. And then I'll jump to each one. So I'm going to talk about tribal politics. I want to touch on the Joe Rogan Trump interview. What I think about that happening, the comedian at the Trump rally who called Puerto Rico garbage, Biden calling Trump supporters garbage, terrible arguments, additionally from that, terrible arguments that I hear coming from both sides, and end by stating who I think is going to win personally. But let me first start out with the first one I mentioned, which is tribal politics. First of all, I can't stand politics, which is funny coming from a political YouTube channel, but this is what I'm trying to convey, by the way, when I say this is the least political show. What I mean is that when something becomes politicized, or the way that we currently operate with our politics, is it becomes very tribal, and it becomes really like a disdain for anyone who's on the other side of your tribe. And part of the politicky part of politics, if that even makes sense, that I really dislike, and what I'm trying to say with the YouTube slogan that I have, is this idea that when you have a side, you stick to your side and you view whatever your side says in the most charitable way, and you view whatever the other side says in the most, wicked form that it could possibly be said, and you defend your side no matter what, and you condemn the other side no matter what. I can't stand that. That's the political stuff that I really try to avoid here, and I'm not perfect at it. Of course, I have my own bias as well, but I do try to avoid that. I want to be fair. I want to be able to say, I'll take Trump for an example. I want to be able to say that there are a lot of things that Trump says that I agree with, and at the same time, there are a lot of things that Trump says and does that I disagree with. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but we kind of play this all or nothing game. If you're for Kamala, then everything she says is good, and at the heart of it, even if it sounds bad, the heart's coming from the right place. And if you're against Trump, then everything he says is bad, even if it sounds good. His heart probably has a wicked intent, and vice versa. And I can't stand that. Politics have just been driving me absolutely bananas. And sometimes I don't even want to talk about politics because it's so divisive. And yet I started a channel about it, and I want to continue this channel. So anyway, that's just some thoughts I have about tribal politics. I wish that we as a country would be more united, and that doesn't mean united in thought, but it means united in heart, right? It doesn't mean we all have to agree on everything, but it does mean that even when we disagree, that we give people the benefit of the doubt. That's a basic practice that I really try to incorporate, that I think all of us should, which is that even if somebody says something, even if it's on the other side of you, that you disagree with, or that didn't come out right, give them a charitable view of what they said. So don't always assume that it comes from the worst place, because I think a lot of times it doesn't on both sides. I think people are trying to do often what they think is right, even if they're missing it. So anyway, that's my spiel about tribal politics. If you made it through all of that spiel, thank you. I appreciate it. Joe Rogan interview. Let me just talk briefly about that. Just the fact that podcasts are officially becoming more relevant to even campaigns and these elections than mainstream media, which is crazy to think about. I mean, if you tried to explain that 5-10 years ago, that would be such a foreign concept to try to understand. And yet, really, with Joe Rogan's podcast with Trump, I think it hit over 40 million views on YouTube alone, which is just crazy, the amount of influence that these podcasts are having over mainstream media. It's crazy that it's happening. Honestly, I think it's probably a good thing. I don't agree with, there are many podcasts all out there. I don't agree with all of them, of course. But the way that podcasts are formatted, that it's a lot more conversation based, not little bites, little bite-sized pieces of catchphrases and all of this, and little games that you're trying to play with slogans. I like that it's more conversation-based. I think that's the right way to go moving forward, is that podcasts, not just Joe Rogan's, he's the biggest, but podcasts all over the place become more of what has influence, because you actually get to hear people speak and you get to hear them lay out their ideas thoroughly instead of just in little bite-sized pieces that are supposed to just be inflammatory or engaging in some way. So overall, I think that's good. I think it was a win for Trump to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it was a major loss for Kamala to not go on that podcast, especially since my understanding of the Joe Rogan podcast is that most of his viewers are men, where Kamala is really struggling with. So I think it would have been very good for her to do the podcast strategically, even though she would have had to compromise on some things that she didn't want to compromise on, like flying out to Texas, like the interview being about 3 hours. I think she should have done it. I think that was a mistake, and I think it may cost her, but we'll see. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about the comedian at Trump's rally that said that Puerto Rico is basically floating garbage. He made a joke about that. Take a look.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right.
Okay. So this is obviously a bad joke and a bad look heading into the final weeks of the election. Some people say that Trump is fully responsible for what this person said. And then some people say that Trump has no responsibility. I actually take a little bit more of the middle of the road approach on this one, which is this. I don't think that Trump has full responsibility for what the comedian said. He said his own words, and I think Trump actually came out and said that he doesn't follow that line of thinking. So I don't think it's on Trump in that regard. Where I do think it's on him, or at least on his campaign, is they chose to have a very inflammatory comedian who's known for roasting on the final week or weeks leading up to the election. I think that was a bad choice. And I think that was a bad choice that they made, knowing that this person could come out and say some things like that, and they risked it. And I do not think it paid off. And so that's where they are responsible for choosing who they bring to speak at the rally. Where I don't think they're responsible is the words didn't come out of their mouth. And I think they responded to it probably appropriately by denouncing it or saying that that's not their line of thinking. But I still think it was a miss for them to bring a comedian that's known to be inflammatory to the rally in the final weeks. I think it was strategically bad. I think it may have some effect, maybe minorly, but some. Let me transition now to President Biden calling Trump supporters garbage, and take a look at this clip.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
It is a much bigger deal, in my opinion, that the sitting president says that Trump supporters, 80 million-ish people, are garbage, than a comedian at the rally saying that Puerto Rico is a floating garbage in the middle of the ocean. Both are bad, but I think coming from a sitting president obviously carries more weight. He wasn't trying to be funny. The comedian was trying to be funny. So definitely, that was worse. Here's where I will give it. I'm not totally convinced that that's what Biden meant to say. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he did mean to say that. But you hear him mumbling all through, kind of, stumbling over his words leading up to that statement where he says the only garbage I see are his supporters. You see him kind of fumbling his words all the way up to that point. Based on what I've seen him say in the past, I think that I've seen him be pretty careful to not try to demonize all of Trump's supporters. I could be wrong, and maybe some of you in the comments can check me on that, because I very well may be wrong. But based on what he said in the past, I don't think that he was trying to say that personally. I don't know what he was trying to say, but my guess is that that is not what he was trying to say. That if he wrote down what he was going to say beforehand, that is not what he would have said. Is it possible that that's what he thinks and it just slipped out and came up? Yeah, definitely. That's definitely possible that that's what happened. Is it possible that that's what he meant to say? Definitely. It's definitely possible. Regardless of whether or not he meant to say that, though, he did say it. And so we can argue motive and intent all we want. And some of you may feel very strongly that that's exactly what he was trying to say. I tend to lean on that. I don't think that's what he was trying to say, but he said it. But either way, he said it. And that is a terrible, terrible thing to say in the week leading up to the election. I think that motivates a lot of people that were leaning Trump that could see that and say, you think that I'm garbage because I'm leaning this way? Well, forget that. I'm going to go vote exactly for the way I was leaning. Or maybe even people that are on the fence, it may push them over. And so either way, I think that that was a terrible thing to say. I think Kamala responded right to it by just going the total other way. And she's been expressing that Trump voters are not that she actually wants to win them over in her presidency. I think that was the right things for her to say. But either way, terrible, terrible comments from Biden on that leading up to this election. Let me now give a couple of terrible arguments from both sides that really, really bother me. And then we'll end with me just sharing who I think is going to win personally. Let me start out with the terrible argument coming from the Trump side of things. That I mentioned this, I think, in another video that a while back. This argument drove me bananas, and it still is. Trump was on a podcast. As they were having this conversation, the issue of Kamala's race came up, and they started talking about whether or not she's black or Indian or what she is. And take a little look at this exchange right here, and then I'll share some things.
Kamala, who is apparently black, she's up 41. And
what do you mean by apparently?
I mean, that's what they're telling us. We're supposed to believe she's black.
No,
and,
it's much better than, no. See, I would never say a thing like that. But you said, don't explain to what you mean. No, I don't want to put you in trouble.
Yeah, apparently. Well, I mean,
I was going to throw it onto your shoulders, apparently. Well, no, you could explain it because I understand.
I'm very comfortable explaining it because overnight, she's doing a show. She's supposed to be Indian. And then all of a sudden now it's black, but it's not landing.
Okay. This argument is just so frustrating. It really is. It's super frustrating. She's biracial. So her mom is from India, I believe, and her dad is black, or it could be vice versa, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. And so she's both. She's both black and Indian. And so she's biracial. So this kind of throwing out there, I don't even know if she is black. Like, come on. I mean, it's silly to me. And I think that Trump should denounce that immediately. As soon as that comes up, Trump should say, yeah, but the reality is that she's biracial. So she is black and she is Indian. So there's nothing really to comment there. But there's he doesn't want to say it, but he's okay with it being said because he also has some questions. And it's just honestly silly to me. I just really think it's silly. It's one of those things because she's the enemy of your side. You're just trying to find whatever way you can to come against her, including questioning her ethnicity. But being biracial is not a complicated thing. It's really not. And so, I just think that that's a ridiculous argument that never should have been brought forth to begin with, in my opinion, because it's so obvious and clear that she's both, because she has one parent that's black and one that's Indian, but definitely shouldn't be fed in any way. And so I think that's a terrible argument, and that frustrates me when I hear that. I really want Trump, whenever that comes up, to just shut it down and say, no, she is black, but she's also Indian. She's both. So it's nothing. It's nothing to even talk about. So that's on one side. Another argument, I'll say an argument from the other side that also drives me bananas, probably more because it's more widespread, is the Trump-Hitler comparisons. Gosh, those just really drive me absolutely insane when I hear how regularly Trump is being compared to Hitler, or it's just being thrown out that even if they're not directly comparing him because they're trying to do it in more covert ways, they'll just throw out some behaviors that are happening or some things that are being done and then say, who else did things like this? Hitler. And that comparison is just, you're trying to get people riled up. You're making an emotional appeal to people to have a disdain for this Hitlerian figure. And it's frustrating. It really is. Like the rally that he had in Madison Square, and how they were pointing out that who else had a rally there many years ago is Hitler. Yeah, but so did other presidential candidates. And you can fact check me in the comments. I should have written it down, but I think it was also Clinton and Bush. I believe both had rallies in Madison Square. I think Hillary Clinton did as well. So just trying to find any way to relate Trump to Hitler is just a weak argument in my point. You're just trying to put fear in people, and I can't stand it. It bothers me to no end. So with that being said, let me just end by sharing personally who I think is going to win. And then we'll end the video there, and I'm looking forward to seeing who actually wins. This is going to be a really interesting one. First of all, according to the polls and kind of the feel of the momentum, it's tight. It looks like it is a tight race. So I don't believe it's going to be a landslide in either direction. But I am leaning that I do think, based on what I'm seeing and based on kind of the feel of the conversation, I do believe that Trump is on track to win. Now, that's a guess. I could be wrong. In fact, I think that I said that I thought that Trump was going to win in 2020, and he didn't. Biden won. So I was wrong. So that's what these are. They're guesses. But if I had to guess, that is where I would lean, is that I do think Trump is probably going to win. If you asked me, after Kamala initially got appointed or anointed as the Democratic person running here, if you asked me right after that, there was such momentum around it that I thought maybe she's going to win. But since then, it's really kind of slowed down. And I just think that there are some key things that I think hurt her. I think she has not let people hear enough of her policies. She hasn't had enough long-form interviews expressing what her viewpoints are. And so I think people have a lot of question marks around what she actually believes, because she had a lot of things that she ran on in previous elections, and yet here has really tried to run towards the middle. But people, I think, are trying to follow, in fact, in me included, what actually do you believe? Because I understand running towards the middle because you're trying to reach out to people that you need their votes. But what do you actually believe? Let me say it this way. I know people feel like they actually know Trump more than Kamala. Trump is blunt to a fault, right? He'll tell you exactly how he feels. He'll say it over and over again. And so you can love or hate what he's saying, but you know who the guy is. He's very clear. If you don't know who he is, follow him on Truth Social or Twitter, and he'll tell you who he is every day, multiple times a day, right? He'll just throw his opinions out there. And with Kamala, it feels more like her opinions, it's almost as if she's had conversations with a focus group about where she should land on a certain thing before she says what she believes. And I think people feel that. I feel that I don't know what she actually believes. And so she may say she believes one thing, but does that mean when she actually gets in there, she's going to govern that way? I don't know. And I'm not saying she won't. Maybe she will. Maybe she'll do exactly what she's saying. But we just haven't heard her speak a lot. And even when she does speak, I can't tell if she's landing on that conclusion because that's the right place to land politically to win votes, or if it's because that's what she actually believes. Because what she had originally shared when running for president last time is that a lot of what she believed was much further left than what she's sharing now. So it is kind of a general thought that during the primaries of your political party, you run to the right or the left, but then during the general election, you run to the middle. So that's kind of normal. I get it. But because we haven't heard that many words come out of her mouth about these policies, I think there's a lot of question around what she actually believes. And it is true that when she speaks, a lot of times, I've heard a lot of people say there's kind of like a word salad. I do think there's some bloviating happening, and which is essentially saying a lot of words without actually saying anything. There's kind of like some circular talking where you're not actually saying much, but a lot of words came out. I think there's some of that too, and that's why I would love, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love for her to go sit down on a long form podcast where she can just talk for hours. And I think that would be really good. I would be interested to hear what she has to say and genuinely try to understand what her viewpoints are, because I think there's a lot of question marks. And I think all of that to say, I think that's going to hurt her come election day here. And I think that she should have taken more hard interviews, more long form interviews to give some confidence to the American people that could have voted for her on what exactly she believes, and then they could have done it. But I'm interested to know, who do you guys think is going to win this election? Do you agree with me, by the way, on everything I said, or do you think there's some things that I'm missing it on in my perspective, which can totally happen? And anyway, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. Other than that, guys, like I said, I have a studio, a set location that should be up and running either this week or next week. And then you'll see more of a uniform location with some better sound quality. I do have a mic that I'm excited to start using again. It's coming right up. So I'll see you guys at the next Jonathan Dearman show. Peace out.